Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Polcast. I think it's episode 11. We've got three guests tonight. We have John. How are you doing tonight, John?
Not too bad, yeah. Surviving in West Wales.
I heard it's incredibly windy tonight, John. Are you going to be okay? You're not going to die, are you?
If you hear like a crash, then my roof's gone off.
And then you've obviously died.
Yeah, basically.
So for everyone who hasn't watched before, John, how would you describe your political ideology?
I describe myself as a true centrist who I'm a UKIP member, but I'm pretty moderate, and I'm
Do you think that's an oxymoron, though? Centrist UKIP member?
not really. I think I'm the true centre and is looking out for what's best, no matter what, for the country. But I am a bit.
So if that included staying in the European Union, you would support that, wouldn't you, John?
Nope.
Okay, fair enough. Moving on, we've got Harry. How are you doing tonight, Harry?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, actually. I've got my coursework out of the way, so I'm doing pretty good.
Ah,
So how would you describe your political ideology, Harry?
Well, I'd say I'm a radical centrist who desperately wants to see Labour return to power.
At all costs.
Oh, no.
So if someone said, yeah, Labour can win, but you've got to ban it, all your principles, would you accept that?
No, not at all.
Okay, fair enough. And then we've got Milton. How are you doing tonight, Milton?
I'm a little bit tired actually, but surviving.
Oh, I feel a bit bad now. Oh. So how would you describe your political ideology?
I don't know. I believe in Northern Ireland. I mean that's
the best ideology ever. I believe in my country. That's my ideology.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we still have political problems here, and there's still that divide and everything. And I don't really care for the old green and orange politics of things that have gone on here. I just believe in Northern Ireland and the people of Northern Ireland, and the future of Northern Ireland is local government.
Yeah. Do you think like Northern Ireland needs a political revolution in terms of going away from the sectarian divide and the troubles of the the DUP and etc. etc. Would you say that?
I would say that there's still a lot of entrenched views out there around what happened in the past, and people in a slightly harsh way kind of need to get over it now, because it did happen in the past. That is kind of harsh because a lot of bad things did happen, but it's the only way we can move forward.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm Lily. I'm a centre-left social liberal, fundamentally believe in liberalism. Used to be a big fan of Jeremy Corbyn, not a really big fan at the moment. Yeah, let's get started. So I think we've got about 3 topics tonight, isn't that right, John? We've got the budget,
Yeah.
Mao, we've got Labour, we've got Syria, and hopefully we can have like a general topic at the end, hopefully.
So Mao and Labour are the same.
Yeah, obviously. Come on.
What a sorry state of affairs.
I know.
Can I just make my excuses?
Oh, no, it's great. It's
I'm
not
a
sorry at
complete
all.
idiot.
But yeah, so the first topic we've got tonight is the budget spending review, which happened on Wednesday, I think. So George Osborne announced, I don't think he completely scrapped the changes to tax credits, but it's been allocated to the universal credit, I think. He also said that the tampon tax would be the money gained from the tampon tax would be given to women's refugee centres as well. What else did he say? What else did he say was in the budget, John? Do you remember?
I think there were 2 main things to come across it. I mean, it was more of sort of a general tone. He was trying to lessen the blows across the entire spectrum, really.
Mm. Yeah, you also had I think he said he wouldn't cut any more police officer numbers in response to terrorist attacks in France. It seems like a very nice budget. When you say that, Harry, you think George Osborne's spending review was a good decision?
I don't think you could say it was a nice budget, but I think you could say it was better than expected. What was expected was obviously a lot worse than what happened, but I wouldn't say it was a nice budget. I think any Labour Party budget would have been nicer than that budget.
So how would you respond to that, John? Do you think it's a nice budget?
I suppose it's that George Osborne isn't being paid to be nice. He's being paid to fix the economy, and I'd argue with this budget he's still going to do it, but he's not going to stick to his plan that he campaigned upon in 2015 and 2010. We've seen spending increase, the deficit isn't going down like it should do, debt is still going up. So I think while perhaps you could argue it was nicer than what we expected, he's not doing his job with it.
Okay. So what would you say to that, Milton?
Well, here's where I show my ignorance, because I don't actually know what was in the spending review. I hadn't had the chance to actually sit down and listen or read much about it.
Yeah.
So, but I do know that obviously George Osborne and the Conservatives were voted in on a mandate of, getting spending under control, as I believe they like to call it.
Yeah.
Which means austerity, essentially. Which, it's one way to do it.
I mean, to me, it seems like George Osborne's just doing what he normally does in terms of having a very, very populist budget, trying to portray as, I'm a nice guy. Like he would relentlessly cut a certain part of the budget, and then the next budget he'll slightly increase it. So he'll cut it by like 75%, and then the next budget will increase it by 1%. And he'll say, "Look at us, look at me, I'm doing an amazing job by increasing it by 1%."
Isn't this the funny thing, though, that he's getting voted in on spending cuts and then flipping over to the other side and actually not cutting as much as he told everyone he was going to cut, whereas the other way to do it would be to say, I'm going to spend loads.
I think this is the advantage he has. There's no real opposition to him doing this currently. He can slip more into the centre ground, and no one's there to challenge him for the centre.
Mm.
So he can get away with this, and I'd argue it's economically dangerous, because we can argue about him being nice or there being different ways of doing this. The key issue is we have to rebalance our economy, and George Osborne is not doing this like he should.
Yeah, I think also the problem is Labour doesn't really have a coherent message against. They seem to be doing what they normally do and just saying, "Oh, cuts are bad," but there's no real narrative about it. Like, for example, the last general election, they were a bit wishy-washy in terms of there was no real communication, there was no real economic message. They just said austerity's bad. We're going to continue it, but ours is going to be slightly better, and I don't really think that's coherent.
I think this is the genius of Osborne, like you said, with him cutting and then spending a bit more. He's continually wrong-footing them, because they were being prepared for cuts to police, tax credits, no devolution, and then he's not done all of that. He's offered Wales tax powers with no referendum. He's not cut the police. Tax credits have basically been kicked down the road eternally, and so Labour has been left to moan about the tampon tax as their main point of attack.
Yeah, Osborne's he seems to be just like Gordon Brown, to be honest. Would you say that, John? He seems a very Brownite kind of chancellor in terms of very populist and keeps the bad stuff behind the message.
Yes.
Like he'll say, I'm listening to the people, I'm abolishing tax credits, and then behind the scenes he's still going to cut welfare by £12 billion, but we don't really know where.
Gordon Brown gets a lot of stick, but I've always thought he was a very good, hard politician who just tried to do a job.
Although he made many, many mistakes.
In the end, he made many, many mistakes, though, yes. But he was just there to do his job and was artful at getting his message across.
Yeah. So, Milton, what do you think the biggest priorities for Northern Ireland are? What do you think should have been in the budget for Northern Ireland to help the Northern Ireland economy?
Oh, Jesus.
That's a big question, I know, but...
I don't have a fucking clue.
But where do you think the focus should lie?
I mean, the thing is, lots of things in Northern Ireland are paid for out of the block grant, which we get from the Treasury. So just increasing the block grant alone would be enough to fund more things.
Yeah.
That's essentially it.
Yeah. So do you think so? Essentially, it's just the block grant is the biggest priority for Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, most things are like roads are funded out of the block grant, hospitals, schools. Most things that actually we use and care about in Northern Ireland are funded from the block grant.
So, Harry, what kind of alternative budget would you want to see from Labour?
Well, I would have once seen less cuts where they did occur in the more essential departments. I would have preferred to see more investment in infrastructure because I know that everyone knows that creates more economic growth. But really, I'd have preferred to just not make the cuts that George Osborne did. I quite like some of the devolution he's doing and some of the devolution he's giving in terms of local powers, but that's coupled with cuts to the local government, and that these two things shouldn't be going hand in hand.
Yeah. So in that case, would you oppose or support HS2? By the way.
Well, it sounds very good to start with, but the problem is I don't believe that HS2 is going to make more people want to. I think the argument is that HS2 is going to make more people want to live in Manchester, because it's more easily accessible to London. But I don't think it is. All I think it's going to do is make people in Manchester go to London more. It's not going to lower house prices in London. All it's going to do is make people in Manchester going to go to London more. It's just going to make Britain more London-centric. And yeah,
I mean, for me, in terms of transport in general and HS2, it doesn't seem to be a very long-term plan like you see in Germany. For instance, in Wales, I don't think there's enough investment in terms of solving the transport problems that we have. Like to get from get where you are, John, from here takes 5 hours, and we have to go back into England. We need to go to Shrewsbury and then up to where you live, which is I can't really pronounce where you live, but Aberystwyth. Yeah, I can't pronounce that. I'm so sorry. So in terms of infrastructure, it just doesn't seem to be good enough. Don't seem to be focusing on improving the main.
But again, it's a London-centric thing. I mean, I come from the East Midlands, and everyone's against HS2 because they just see it as all the money will go from Manchester to Birmingham to London, and everything will be dragged there again. I mean, you mentioned not investing much in the infrastructure in Wales. It's a similar story going east-west in the country. It's very easy to get from Birmingham to London or Sheffield to London. It's almost impossible to get from Birmingham to Nottingham or Birmingham to Leicester.
Yeah.
I
mean, for instance, as well, the HS2 line is going to go through Crewe, but not through Stoke. And no offence to Crewe, but Stoke is more economically powerful than Crewe and more powerful.
The HS2 line is flawed from the start.
It seems very, very political.
Not only does it go through just about every nature reserve it could, if they had built it along the same route as the current train, the time saving would be about 7 minutes instead of the 20.
Yeah.
So,
is it only going to save 20 minutes of time?
About, yeah.
Wow, that is fantastic. Spend all your money.
And it's going to cost like £50 billion or so.
Yeah. Spend all your money on that. 20 minutes time saving is definitely worth at least 50 billion.
This is what we have to combat, though, is that all the MPs in London think that it is worth it because then they can get to London faster.
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't see anyone making a financial case as much as they should be making it. I think a lot of people make the anti-Trident case purely on a financial basis and not on a safety basis. Why are we not seeing this being challenged on a financial basis? Our current rail networks are in tatters. Constant delays, and mismanaged railways, and expensive tickets they're all part of the same problem, which is a lot of our railways focus on or use ancient technology, and that's why our ticket prices are so high. That's why a lot of delays are happen, and that's why our rail network is seen as shambolic in Europe.
Yeah, there's no real long-term economic plan that you see in Germany, for instance.
No,
I mean,
It's kind
Germany's
of interesting, isn't it, that the Tories keep going on about long-term economic plans.
yeah, it's the most
Never
vacuous
proposed
fucking term ever. It's so short-term based, but Labour's so incompetent that they just don't really challenge it. It's a joke. It's the same, John. It's the same as Northern Powerhouse. Like they talk about Northern Powerhouse, and there is no Northern Powerhouse. Like they're cutting funding for councils in the north, and there's no real investment, like telecommunications for
We
Yorkshire.
see over
If they
this
want a
country-
northern powerhouse, they should start by stopping the steel collapsing.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
we're seeing industry collapse like we've seen industry collapse for the last 2 or 3 decades, and no one's trying to stop it, and it's terrible.
You can't stop it because you're competing against India and China, who they have a much cheaper labour market. They can produce these things much cheaper than
But
any.
the problem with the steel at the moment is that China are dumping on it. So China are dumping their really cheap steel on us at the moment below what it costs for them to make. So when our steel manufacturers go out of business, they'll have the monopoly and be able to push their prices back up.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. Pretty much.
One interesting proposal I've seen is trade deals. Only having free trade deals with countries that share, similar values, like a minimum wage similar to ours, etc., etc.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
like the Anglosphere.
Mm.
That's a phrase I love saying.
Is that because you support it, John? That's why, because you want that Anglosphere, which will never
Just
happen.
a bit. It'll happen.
Is it just because of cultural reasons? Is that the sole reason why?
Well, cultural reasons lead into other reasons, like Harry mentioned, economic reasons.
Yeah, I suppose. But I mean, the fundamental problem with our economy is that it seems very, very short-term based.
Oh,
We
it's
don't seem to
terribly
be-
short-term.
We don't seem to be dealing with the productivity problem. We don't seem to be dealing with the balance of payments problem, which we've got at the moment, because we've got a massive deficit. And it just seems like it's kind of similar to our economy in like 2005, 2006, where, yeah, there's economic growth, yeah, wages are increasing, yeah, inflation's low, but it seems very, very short-term based. Like there's a housing bubble at the moment, which the Chancellor still isn't, addressing. Help to buy, right to buy is still continuing. The supply of houses isn't going to be increasing. Welfare for the poorest is going to be cut. The basic pension for pensioners is increasing, whilst at the same time, tuition fees is likely to go up to 11,500. Like the social contract for young and old people, it seems to just be
government
completely
doesn't
breaking
like-
down.
People don't vote.
I know, but you shouldn't be basing your economics on politics, though, should you?
But as we've said, this government doesn't do long-term, they do short-term. They shouldn't be basing their economics on who votes, but they are going to.
Obviously, they're going to be. That's the problem, though. Is because if people don't, if they don't see something as beneficial to their politics and beneficial to them getting re-elected, they're not going to do it. And yeah, I think that's a problem with their populist budgets. But
It's not just the
Who can-
Tories.
I'm not saying it is. But who can you blame that on? Can you blame that on the people that don't vote, or can you blame that on?
I think we have to blame it on the people who encourage it.
Well, the thing is, that's where Jeremy Corbyn might be actually quite good, because he's a very principled person. So
He's not. No, he's not.
rather than
Ooh, I'm now going to watch 3 left-wing people argue about Corbyn.
No, Jeremy Corbyn is not a principled person. You say he's a principled person, but what are those principles exactly?
well, I'm just saying he might be good in that he believes in what he believes. So if he
I'll tell you some of the things he believes in.
sorry,
He supports the IRA, or supported the IRA. Yep.
I'm not arguing about what his beliefs are. I'm just saying if he was in government,
If
he
he's a
would.
principled man unwilling to back down, then I don't think that does help him. If he's a principled man unwilling to back down from his unpopular principles, or at least some of them, I don't think that does help him. I think that's to the Labour Party's detriment.
Surely, though, Harry, I mean, under Jeremy Corbyn, we finally have a party that opposes austerity. Surely that's a good thing for the Labour Party. And if we would have elected Liz Kendall, for instance, that would have been an absolute disaster for the Labour Party. Because Liz Kendall would have just been copying the Tories. Surely she's just a red Tory and should just leave the Labour Party. What do you think?
Well, that's an absolutely ludicrous thing to say. I think that, if you have someone, it's anti-austerity, or austerity isn't a binary thing. There's no austerity, not austerity. There's,
But surely the people need a real, vote. I mean, we don't need a Tory line.
Yeah, of course we need a real vote. Of course,
and with
we need
under
a real
Liz
vote.
Kendall, that's something that would actually happen.
You're absolutely
People
right.
wouldn't have a real choice, don't you think?
Of course, people need a real choice, which is why I made the argument for Liz Kendall. When we get rejected as badly as we did in May, we shouldn't be lurching
That's
on further
because
to
we were
left.
too far to the right, though, wasn't it? We need a real
No,
anti-austerity
it's not
party.
at all.
Look
You
at the
can't say
SNP in Scotland. I mean, they got
Anti-austerity
56
politics.
MPs thanks to their anti-austerity agenda. Surely we need that in
No,
the
it's
Labour
not to
Party.
do with that. It's to do with nationalism. Nationalism's why the SNP won. They're not, you can't say they're truly anti-austerity when they, for example, support free markets. I think what you can't be making these assumptions. The people do need a real vote. They need a real alternative to the Tories, and we're not giving them one right now. When we were rejected as badly as we were for being too left-wing in May, we shouldn't be lurching further to the left. We should be thinking, what has worked for us in the past. And I'll tell you one thing that's worked for us in the past: modernisers. Clement Attlee was a moderniser. Harold Wilson was a moderniser, and Tony Blair was a moderniser. All three of those people introduced some amazing things for this country that this country wouldn't be the same without some of these amazing things that these people have introduced. But we're so willing to ditch our record and slate our records. What did Tony Blair introduce for us? He
Invaded
introduced-
Iraq in a legal war, introduced PPI,
Illegal war is a misnomer.
massive deficits, privatisations, the market being
that's not what-
unregulated.
he
Surely
introduced-
Tony Blair was such a disastrous Prime Minister. We need a real left-wing voice, Harry.
We need a Labour Party Prime Minister, but we're not going to get one unless we move to the centre ground. and learn
Absolutely,
some
we're
lessons
going to
from
have
Tony
that
Blair.
with Jeremy Corbyn in 2020. Absolutely.
No, we're not. We're not, because the opinion polls have told us, look.
Oh, you're going to trust the opinion polls? Are
Well,
you
no,
seriously
I'm
going to
not-
trust the opinion polls based on Jeremy Corbyn? People just need to, see Jeremy Corbyn more, and ultimately, surely under Jeremy Corbyn, we will win.
I'm sorry, people, ever since he was elected on the 12th of September, people have seen Jeremy Corbyn more. I'll tell you how they've seen Jeremy Corbyn more. They've seen him and his leadership team come
Under
with
his
constant
principles.
cock-ups. No, they haven't.
Alternative Prime Minister.
They've been faced by constant cock-ups from that leadership team. For example,
I think that's a complete smear. You shouldn't be talking down the Labour Party.
Can we just talk about principles for a second? I mean, I'm now going to be the typical UKIP and talk about the EU. As we all know, Jeremy Corbyn was a massive Eurosceptic, but the instant he became...
How do you know that? How do you know that?
because
of
he's
his
campaigned
voting
on
record.
it. He's campaigned on a Eurosceptic platform for the past 40 years.
Yeah, but don't you think? Sorry to interrupt, but surely there is so much to criticise the European Union at the moment. There's a lack of transparency.
Yes.
There's a lack of democracy.
Absolutely there is. Absolutely there
Surely
is.
it's not
But why is
necessarily
Jeremy Corbyn
Eurosceptic.
making? Why is? Absolutely there is. But you can't call Jeremy Corbyn someone that's very principled when his principles for 40 years were that of Euroscepticism, and then after that he has just been so willing to back down from that and not even criticise it and even join the Labour in camp. I don't think you can say he's a principled man.
So what was you going to say, John?
No, that was literally my point.
Oh, okay. Well, as you know, John, talking about the European Union, with UKIP simply isn't good enough. We need to talk about more things other than immigration and the European Union. And that's why UKIP's going to fail next year and over the next 5 years, because they're ultimately a populist right-wing party that has no real message. Don't you think?
I'm going to enjoy next Thursday quite a bit.
The problem is, look, I think John's exactly right. We are facing in a seat that we used to have a 12,000 majority, where Michael Meacher used to sit, who's
Well, it's because of Blairites in the party talking down and leaking things. It's outrageous for Blairites, right-wing Labour MPs in the party, to be talking about Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn is doing a
Why is
fantastic
Jeremy
job.
Corbyn deciding not to visit then, if it's just the Blairites and...
Because he's a busy man, John. Ultimately, he's such a busy man. He's got more important things to deal with right now.
What, like supporting Hezbollah?
That's a complete smear, Harry. Come on, you're better than this.
It wasn't.
No,
a smear,
you
it was a
shouldn't
question.
be this red Tory talking down the Labour Party, okay? It's absolutely shameful. Absolutely shameful.
I
Okay.
don't think you can call me a red Tory when I supported the Labour government that did so many good things for this country. That introduced the national minimum wage. That introduced so many things. They introduced tax credits. Which we're now seeing the Tories slash. I'm absolutely against the Tories chopping them
And
up
it's
and
not going to
demolishing
happen
them.
now, thanks to the leadership of Jeremy
Well,
Corbyn.
no, it is. It is going to happen. It's just going to happen under the name of universal credit. I'm absolutely against that, and you can't call me a red Tory when they're the. You can't call me a red. You can't compare me to the Tories when I'm the one. We're the ones to introduce that, and they're the ones abolishing that. Can you?
Anyway, moving on to Mao. So how does everyone think of John McDonnell's response? Because from my point of view, I think John McDonnell did a fantastic response. Ultimately,
It was
I think his use
perfect in
of
every way.
Mao was entirely appropriate in terms of making the point about George Osborne selling off assets to China. And I think it was just a joke, and I think Blairites in the party should just get over it.
Is
I think
killing
it was
70 million
perfect.
people a joke for you?
Sorry.
Say what? Sorry?
Starvation of 70 million people a joke?
Yeah, but everyone makes jokes about Mao, though. I mean, for example, Robert Halfon, I think in
made jokes
June.
about Mao in the past. In fact, I posted a picture and said, I'm the Chairman Mao lookalike at the back of
Yeah,
myself.
so everyone makes jokes about Chairman Mao. Surely,
I think
you
it
need
was
to get over it, Harry.
perfect response. Because now all we're going to talk about is Chairman Mao and not how terrible John McDonnell's
But surely that's
response
the
was
media.
generally.
It's the right-wing media being opposed to Jeremy Corbyn, which is shameful.
Oh no, it's John McDonnell knowing the right-wing media are opposed to him and therefore doing the joke so that they only talk about his joke and not how he didn't have any answers to Osborne.
I think he had many answers to Osborne.
Could have
John.
Including throwing a
I
book
think
at
you're
him.
being absolutely shameful here, John, criticising John McDonnell. He's doing a
What else
fantastic
am I meant
job
to do? He
as
did
the
a
Shadow
terrible
Chancellor.
job.
I don't think John, as a UKIP supporter, is doing a bad job because I think he's saying exactly the right things, and who's saying the wrong things?
How
John
about you
McDonnell.
join UKIP then, Harry? How about you join UKIP? I'm sure
I'm
you'd be much
fundamentally
better.
I'm fundamentally against a lot of things that UKIP stand for. For example, I'm pro-immigration. I'm pro-EU. I think we're better together in Europe, and I'd be really sad and upset to see us leave the European Union. I think it would put our country in
You
a
keep
bad
saying
place.
Europe and the EU like they're interchangeable.
No, but what are UKIP? Are they anti-EU or anti-Europe? I'd hasten to say they're anti-Europe. I'd say they're anti-Europe.
Well,
I completely agree there. Completely agree there.
that's a very interesting way of putting it, but hey ho.
So you would all say that John McDonnell did a fantastic job in response
No,
to
not
George
at all.
Osborne.
It was amazing. Never
Okay,
have
so
I seen anyone Never have I seen anyone take such a train wreck and then completely distract the media so well.
John says it's a fantastic response, which I agree with. What do you think, Milton? Do you think that was a good response?
I don't know what the response was. Again, showing my ignorance.
Did you see him throw Mal's little red book at Osborne?
I didn't see any of it. I was in work, because I do that now.
Oh, what do you work for? Who do you work for?
I manage a charity shop.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So I was in work, and all I heard was what was on the radio on the drive home, which was something about Mao, something about tax credits.
Okay.
Yeah, when you heard about John McDonnell, did you hear him say anything other than the Mao stuff? Was anything else mentioned about John McDonnell?
No, I was listening to Radio 4 because I'm an intellectual, don't you know? And it just said that he had made some kind of Mao gaffe.
Exactly. See, he did it deliberately so we wouldn't talk about the fact he had no ideas.
What do you think, Harry?
Well, I think we need a new economy. I think we need socialism, but socialism with an iPad. That is, of course, a joke in reference to his awful speech given to, was it UCL, Economics Department?
It was.
Where John McDonnell said, we need a new economy and we need socialism, but we need socialism with an iPad. What exactly is socialism with an iPad? Is it socialism with just that little tinge of unethical labour, unethical assembly in China? Just a tinge of Foxconn, or is it just a tangent of capitalism, or is it just a tangent of sleek design? What is socialism with an iPad if it's not a stupid soundbite?
So Harry is praising John McDonnell for his response, which I agree with. So overall then, how does everyone think the Labour Party is doing at the moment? I think we're doing well. I think it's shameful for the right-wing media and Blairites in the party to be criticising John McDonnell. I think we need to unite. I think we need to unite as a party under Jeremy Corbyn.
I agree. I mean, in the last day,
Thank you, John. Thank you.
we've had John McDonnell quote Mao. We've had Diane Abbott say on balance Mao did good. Despite 40 million people dying, he'd done more good.
Exactly.
And then later it turned out that John McDonnell had said that the IRA were right and bombs were needed to unite Ireland, and that any Labour Party councillor that didn't meet the political wing of the IRA should be kneecapped. And then tomorrow we're going to have Jeremy Corbyn take part in a peace march to leave all minorities in the Middle East alone in the hands of the Islamists. So, as far as I'm concerned, Labour is doing perfectly, and I look forward to Thursday.
This is the thing about ideology, is that I don't like to tie myself down to ideology too much, because there's always that cognitive dissonance where somebody believes something and then passionately believes the complete opposite and never realizes that they hold two conflicting views at the one time.
Yeah,
Very true.
that is very, very true. But let's move on then to another topic, which is bombing Syria. So, Harry, considering the absolute mess that Tony Blair inflicted upon Iraq, which has helped lead to the rise of Daesh, do you think it's appropriate now that we bomb Syria?
Can you blame Tony Blair for the mess caused in Iraq, or can you blame the early pullout and the lack of political settlement after, which left a power vacuum that was only going to be exploited by ISIS and other Islamist groups?
So are you denying that Tony Blair's actions had any implications in terms of Daesh, considering that Saddam Hussein did a fantastic job in putting down any kind of extremists, wouldn't you say, Harry?
I think that what he did was not Tony Blair. What Saddam Hussein did was, he was a good cover for these extremists, which are now operating under the name of ISIS. I think a lot of people that supported Saddam Hussein now support ISIS or other Islamist groups, and these are groups that just the things they do are unthinkable. Stoning gays, drowning Christians, oppressing women. All of these things should not be okay to do, but yet we're going to leave them unchallenged because we're pacifists. What is pacifism? Where's pacifism ever led us? I don't like the idea. There's an idea going around at the moment with a lot of left wingers that pacifism is an okay. Pacifism is an okay reason to oppose all military action. You can't. I think it's just not. It's not right to say I'm not going to do this because I'm a pacifist. There were pacifists in World War II which didn't want us attacking the Nazis, and they might have said they weren't anti-Semitic. They might have said they didn't like the Hitler regime, but at the end of the day, if they weren't in support of bringing down the Hitler regime and stopping his horrendous crimes against humanity and his horrendous war crimes, then surely they were at least complicit in his actions, right?
What would you say to that, John?
I think Harry is talking a lot of sense there, to be honest. I think, however, we in the West tend to be very arrogant and assume everything is our fault. I've heard a lot about how it's Blair's fault, it's Bush's fault for invading, and no one mentions the Ottomans owning that area of land for hundreds of years. No one mentions the split between the Shia and the Sunnis for 1400 years. So I think before we start blaming ourselves, we should look at deeper roots of why there are Islamists, why there are Sunni extremists. And then once we decide that it's perhaps not completely our fault, then we can start to come up with a proper strategy for defeating IS, which will involve bombing, which will involve arming the Kurds and which will eventually involve Assad remaining president of Syria.
Yeah, I agree there.
I don't think the discussion is so much whether we should get involved in the war, but who we should really be attacking, because as you know, the Russians are trying to stabilize an Assad regime, because they believe that at least Assad was able to run the country. Of course, he's not the greatest person to do it, with human rights violations and everything, but at least he was able to do it. So they're trying to stabilize that, and of course we would prefer not to have Assad in power at all. But I think we will be bombing Syria.
Yeah, I think what we have to get away from is the idea that this will get us involved in the war. We're involved in the war. 600 people have gone to join ISIS from the UK. 100 or so people have gone to fight ISIS from the UK. So we're involved in this war. We're at war. They declared war on us. And it's now time to pick sides and pick responses. I think now that the Russians have decided Assad isn't going to go, he's not going to go. So we have to deal with that and try to come to a settlement there.
Yeah.
And while we're doing that, we should start bombing people.
But then
But
there's
equally, the trap we shouldn't fall into is assuming that everyone that isn't ISIS is cuddly. Because as recent events have shown, there's particular Turkish groups, there's particular Al-Qaeda-linked groups that aren't our friends either.
yeah.
So does everyone think that it's a bit hard now, considering what Turkey has done? Would everyone be happy with working with the Russians in terms of taking out ISIL?
Yeah.
I think it's an inevitability. If we want to take out ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, we're going to have to work. We're going to have to work with them in order to make sure that we're not, being regressive in each other's military tactics, and make, as much as I have a moral objection to what the Russian government does on a daily basis, I think if we are going to go to bomb ISIS in Syria and Iraq, then we need to make sure that we're not directly, we're not stopping, we're being cooperative with other people, because if we're not cooperating with people that are doing the same thing, we might end up, killing more civilians than we need to, taking out targets which were being used for surveillance, etc., etc.
Can we ultimately trust the Russians, though? Would that be a fair question to ask?
I think we have to.
We can trust the Russians to hate Islamist extremists. We can trust the Russians.
But considering they're not even bombing ISIL, though, John, they're not bombing. They're bombing rebels of Assad.
I said Islamists. I didn't say ISIS.
Oh, okay.
The Russians want Assad to stay because they want their naval base, and the Russians want a stable Syria because they want their naval base. So we can trust them that far. But I think the problem we're going to have to face is the fact that ISIS is just sort of one of the heads of the monster. Islamist extremism hasn't begun with ISIS. It didn't begin with Al-Qaeda. It's been going on for centuries now. And the problem is we're going to have to fight a battle of ideas between extremist ideologies. I mean, because at the moment the Saudis and the Iranians are having one of their little matches to see who gets to influence one particular country, and are using extremists on both sides to do it. So I think in the future we're going to have another fight between moderate Islam and extremist Islamism.
Yeah, it's problematic either way, though, isn't it, John? I mean, in terms of solving the problems in the Middle East in terms of ISIL, very, very tricky to find a solution that's 100% going to work, because there's many risks and many dangers. But in terms of
it hasn't been at peace since about 3000 BC. So
yeah, it's a big ask to solve the problems in the Middle East.
We can get it to a stage where it's better than it is now, and that's something to aim for.
Is that the best we can do?
For now, like I said, it's going to be a battle of ideas, and that takes a while.
Yeah. I mean, military intervention can work at times, though. I mean, the idea that intervention can never work, I think, isn't true. I mean, we solved the problems. I think Sierra Leone in terms of genocide and places such as that, or
I mean, the big example.
Serbia, Kosovo.
Yeah, that's the big example. And as we can see there, I mean, it's not perfect anymore. The Kosovo parliament is still divided. Bosnia, there's still no roads between the two. The Serbs still hate the Albanians, but they're not ethnically cleansing each other anymore. So it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely, Harry, in terms of pacifism. We need to make sure we don't get into the argument of pacifism, because pacifism doesn't work. I mean, sometimes using the military is necessary, i.e. the Falklands or Nazi Germany or Kosovo, Sierra Leone. You know, those kinds of problems where genocide, for example, where genocide is occurring, you know, you do need to intervene. But the problem is, you know, will military intervention actually make the situation even better? Because as we know, you know, military intervention in terms of in the Middle East, in terms of a Muslim country, sometimes actually makes the problem worse because it leads to the rise of extremism. It's one of the reasons why Al Qaeda was so successful, is because they were damn good at propaganda, and saying, look, the West are invading our Muslim countries, there's a holy war going on. And ultimately, they were able to gain more supporters, and then they had the additional problems until they bombed. I think it was the holy. I can't remember what it was called, but they bombed a Muslim holy place in 2005 and 2006, and their support dropped because they were realizing that they were actually bombing Muslims more often. Surely we need to be very, very careful here, John, in terms of bombing, in terms of the rise of extremism, or do you think it's a different issue, different problems to what we faced 10 years ago in terms of Al Qaeda?
I think the difference now is that with the Islamist extremists, they've set up their caliphate and they've had victories there for years. So I think anyone that is tempted to join them has done by now.
So you don't think they could have the same propaganda effect?
Not in that area, no. I think everyone that wants them to be there is with them now.
I don't think bombing ISIS is particularly going to solve the problem of ISIS, but I do think it's a natural reaction from the UK and France. And
but what the French are doing at the moment is successfully pushing back ISIS with, you know, in cooperation with the Kurds on the ground. It is successfully pushing back ISIS, isn't it?
It is, but the reason for that is because they had a terrorist attack from ISIS within their borders. So that's the reason why they're doing it. I don't think they're ever going to solve it.
The reason why they're doing it, but it's working in, is it Iraq or Syria? Syria, yeah? It's working in Syria, so...
Yeah. But you're not going to get rid of Islamic extremism or any
but you can topple the Islamic extremism government and, you know, stop the indoctrination of the extremists. Right?
But there's always going to be extremists.
Of course there are, but you can make it less so and more so, depending on your actions, right?
Yeah, of course you can. But I'm not saying you can. I'm just saying you're never going to get rid of the problem of Islamic extremism.
Absolutely you're not, but you can lessen it and make it less of a problem.
Exactly.
And when it becomes such a small problem, it becomes almost not a problem.
Yeah. That's what they're trying to do, is just reduce the threat to essentially the Western governments in Europe.
I mean, surely the biggest problem in this, well, it's not the biggest problem, obviously, that would be stupid, but one of the problems is in terms of Turkey. I mean, they're buying oil from ISIL, they're wanting to expand their influence in the area, they're causing friction between Turkey and Russia. And surely Turkey's a big block as well in terms of solving, you know, the problems in terms of ISIL.
The problem is they're an ally, aren't they?
Shouldn't really be.
No, but they are.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, absolutely, but yeah.
It could be a good political ploy for UKIP to secretly endorse Turkey to join the EU.
Our plan is coming together perfectly. The thing with Turkey is, Turkey has a big problem with political extremism, and the political extremists are kind of in charge now. I mean, for example,
they've been in charge for a while, but they're going more and more extreme, right?
Yeah, because like the Islamist group that killed the group that killed those the Russian pilots, their leader is the son of an MP in the Turkish parliament, and to say that they now aren't influencing extremist or being influenced by extremist groups is kind of undeniable now. I mean, today they've arrested the editor-in-chief of one of Turkey's largest newspapers for saying that Turkey was supporting Islamist groups and buying ISIS's oil.
I think what we need to do is, with Turkey, make sure they're aware that that's not right. And if that's by keeping them as an ally and holding that position as their ally above them, that's probably a better way to do it than, if we had no ties to Turkey whatsoever, we'd have a lot less influence over them.
True. I mean, I think the thing that they've come across of is shooting down that Russian jet, though, because they've suddenly realised that not everyone plays as nice as us, and that's definitely stopped them. I mean, yesterday Russia bombed in turn every border crossing between Syria and Turkey that the Turks control, and now the Turks are desperately trying to meet Putin to sort something out.
Oh, that's hilarious. That is fantastic.
It's something along the lines of, since in the 48 hours since the downing the Russian jet, the Russians have impounded a dozen Turkish cargo ships, deported the entire agricultural ministry in Russia for a conference, arrested and deported, and shut off their Caucasus gas line, and advised all Russians not to travel to Turkey, which makes up about 40% of Turkish tourism, and looked into stopping the export of all Turkish food products into Russia.
Well done, Turkey.
Turkey realising that they can't play as hard as the Russians.
I think the problem here is that that anyone that's looking to pick a side is, or anyone that has picked a side is thinking that it's you have to be in favour of one or the other. You have to be either pro-Russia or pro-Turkey. I'm pro-neither, and I can see the situation is shambolic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would quite happily see Turkey kicked out of NATO. To be honest, they seem to cause more problems than benefits. I think.
But once they're kicked out of NATO, we lose a tie to them, and then lose something that we can hold above their head, and lose policy.
They're so authoritarian though, and anti-democratic. But they're bombing the Kurds, and they're buying oil from ISIL. I mean, they don't seem to be our friends, are they? Like, if there was a war
I think David
Russia,
Cameron's failed to act on that. Absolutely.
I mean, if there was a war between Russia and Turkey, I would probably want to back Russia, even though Turkey is technically our ally. And I
think Turkey has woken up to this fact as well, which could I say lead them down a bad path. Is that when they asked NATO for support, they didn't get any.
I wouldn't get any support. I wouldn't give them any support.
No.
So can I ask, if Turkey joins the EU, how much cheaper will that make Turkish delights?
25% also.
Not much.
Is that your big? Is that the big plus for you? Turkish delights are cheaper. Awesome.
Yeah, I don't buy them that often, but when I do, I'd like them to be a bit cheaper.
Assuming they're all made in Turkey.
Well, of course they are. That's why they're called Turkish delights.
They wouldn't be very good if they were called Rotherham delights, would they?
Ballymena delights.
Anyway, on that note, I think it's best to end this here. If everyone's cool with that.
Yep.
Of course.
You cool with that, Milton?
Yep.
Yep. So, on that bombshell of Turkish delights, we shall. Turkish delights are really not that nice, by the way, Milton. I don't know why you like them. They're really not nice.
I said I don't buy them that often, but when I do,
you shouldn't buy them at all.
Might be once a year. They should be simple.
I say we should be annexing Turkish delights. We should have a trade embargo.
What, next them just their Turkish.
If that's their main.
What is actually in Turkish delights, by the way?
Turkies.
Turkish.
Kebab.
Seriously, I need to find out what's in Kurdistan.
Yeah, the thing is, when kebabs get when the bottom of a kebab, like all the grease and stuff at the bottom of a kebab van, when it gets so greasy, it can no longer become so greasy. It starts again and becomes less greasy. So Turkish delight is literally just compounded grease.
Perpetual greasing device.
Exactly. That's why if you rub a Turkish delight on your shoulder, or sorry, on your elbow, you get a lot more work done. More elbow grease to put into it.
On that bombshell of a fact, we shall leave it there. Thanks everyone who's managed to listen up to this so far. Hopefully we can do this again next week, maybe Friday or something. So, thanks for all the guests today, Harry, John, Milton, me. We'll catch you all next week. Okay. See you. Bye guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.